Welcome, welcome to the PVC NYC TV, as I like to call it. I'm Chris Owens. It's a pleasure to meet you, John, or is it John? How do you like to be addressed?
John's fine. Yeah, my dad's name is John.
I see.
So I go by John. Now I have a son named John. I always make the joke that we don't call him John because you kind of have to draw the line somewhere.
Yes, I got you. Or you don't call him John cubed?
I could go with John.
Well, John Brown, it's a pleasure to meet you. And I will freely admit that I am not intimately familiar with your work. So I'm looking forward to having this discussion and having the opportunity to help promote your upcoming show at the People's Voice Cafe, which will be on December 2nd.
Yep. Right? Yeah, I'm looking forward to
December 2nd, only a few weeks away.
I know. We're right around the corner.
Right. And this interview will be posted on YouTube, and we will also circulate it through social media as well as all of the other things that we want to do. So let's start at the beginning. First of all, where do you live? Where were you born? How did you get involved with music? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I live right now in New Milford, Connecticut, which is Western Connecticut, and I was born about 20 miles from here, so in Pauling, New York, which is upstate New York in the Hudson Valley.
Route 22.
Yeah, exactly. The original town crier was actually right there. But as a kid, I was gifted a keyboard that I could not play, and I remember walking up to it, and I would just basically press like the demo, and would just play "Hey Jude," and I would try to do it. And I could never do it. And then I got a trombone in about third or fourth grade, and I was awful. I would basically just look at people next to me and just make sure that I'm matching the slide. And I gave that up. And then I basically didn't play music again until I was probably about 25 years old.
Wow.
So I got into music, I'm 43 right now. So I got into playing an actual instrument in my mid-20s.
Interesting. If I may interject there, you
Sure.
just reminded me of a situation when my mother was my piano teacher.
Oh, cool.
And she said that when I was little, started to be able to walk, I would listen to her play the piano. And that one day I came over and she was encouraging me to play the piano, and I hit the key, and she said that I quickly realized that what I was playing didn't sound like what she was playing. And so I backed off and never touched the piano again for another 2 years because I didn't want to make that sound. So I'm also remembering my sons when we got our first electronic keyboard for them, and it had that demo button, and they would constantly hit that button. So I must have heard Stevie Wonder's Superstition about 25,000 times on that demo button.
Yeah, it was something to aspire to, that's for sure.
Right, exactly.
And I should say periodically it was still in my room. And probably years 13 or 14, I would still hit it as well. But yeah, and that was it, really. And then I broke my back as a 13 or 14-year-old. And I grew up in a sports family where basketball was a really big deal. My dad was a coach. My brother played overseas in Europe. And that was my whole kind of goal. But then once that went down the tubes, I got surgery, didn't really heal. And then probably about 16 years old, I started playing some music and really getting into it for the first time. Stuff like B.B. King, Stevie Wonder. I remember we used to be able to get those CD packs. You would pay a penny or something, and they'd send you 20.
Right.
So I would say for me, that's when I really found music to be something that I needed in life. And that was, for me, I think about that sometimes, because now as I get older, I don't really, if I love a song, I might play it just a couple of times. But back when I was 16, I think I would play it, 200 times in a row. So I kind of jumped the gun there a little bit, but I would say that's when I really started to really feel music as something that's just, I couldn't live without.
But despite that, you
Yep.
didn't actually start playing an instrument until you were 25.
I didn't. I was convinced at that point that I really physically couldn't do much,
Oh,
because my whole body was just killing me all the time. Um, I had multiple surgeries just kind of popping up out of the blue. Um, and the doctors didn't really know what was going on. So I actually convinced myself probably when I was 21, like, I can't play guitar. Physically, it's just going to hurt my neck, my back. And then at one point I did buy a guitar and I just remember picking it up and I'm like, see, I can't play it. And then someone told me, like, the action was like this. and and then I lowered it. So eventually I was able to pick it up and actually started with lap slide because it was just kind of an easy introduction.
sure, sure.
So
Interesting, interesting.
yeah,
So you listened to a lot of blues when you were younger, a lot of rock, all of the
yeah,
above, and then some?
yeah. I kind of jumped around. I got really deep into at 16, like BB King, Muddy Waters, and then I got into like a lot of the classic rock stuff, like the Doors and Zeppelin, and then into the Grateful Dead, and then into Bob Marley, and then college, just just basically just trying to go like, oh, that's supposed to be really good. Oh, let me listen to that. Oh, that's supposed to be really good.
Mhm.
So I think I need to remind myself to continue to do that in a way as I've gotten older.
It's hard, actually, and I think
It is.
it's hard for a couple of different reasons. One is, we just have so many more things to deal with in terms of our personal schedules. I know you have
Right.
children, I've had boys,
Yeah.
and so you have less time to just sort of relax. And we found in my family that we would turn the radio on in the car. That was the time we would listen to music the most.
Right.
Because in the house we were just busy doing a million things, and also the kids want to watch TV, they don't want to listen
Right.
to music, that kind of stuff. But the other problem is that, in my humble opinion, and I'd be
Hmm.
curious to hear your thoughts, the music we listened to back then
Hmm.
was very different than the dominant music that's popular right now for many young people. Now, I don't want to generalize too much. And it just seems, and maybe it's just me being old, but it
Hmm.
just seems that the level of engagement that you have with a song that has lyrics and a
Hmm.
melodic structure and sort of, draws you in on a sing-along level is very different from a song that may have interesting lyrics, but the
Hmm.
whole dynamic of it is more dance oriented, it's more physical, etc. So I find those to be two very different experiences, and I think that affects how we listen to music today.
Yeah, I agree with you. Uh, my mind goes. So I grew up with the popular music of the '90s, but I held the popular music of the '60s and the '70s to be more powerful,
Mm.
and perhaps it's the structure of it, the like the fact that it could just be played on a guitar, and still or just a piano and still carry through.
Right.
To me, has always been um, something about that. There was just something really great going on during those years to me personally.
So who was your personal favorite guitar inspiration?
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So I probably when I started picking up the guitar, this is 2005. I got a DVD by a guy named Happy Traum.
Hmm.
He runs Homespun Tapes, which is a really wonderful instructional DVD company. At the time, DVD. Right now, it's
Right.
online. And it was Mississippi John Hurt, so he was kind of playing like with the alternate thumb. So for me, it was really getting that alternate thumb going, and learning to kind of pluck the melody on top. So that's pretty much what I do, I guess, from a guitar standpoint. Um, and it's been a challenge to break out of that, to be honest with you. I was talking to my younger brother who plays guitar as well, about how you kind of get locked in to the thing that's comfortable. So that's kind of been my main inspiration, that kind of Travis picking stuff.
Gotcha. You're a picker. Gotcha.
I'm a picker, and I do go to open tuning sometime as well, because I really liked the sound of Dad Gad. So I have some songs as well and some different tunings, which kind of opened up. First time I did that in 2012, I tuned my guitar to, I think it was Dad Gad, and I just couldn't believe that everything sounded great from my guitar. I was like, how is this possible that my guitar sounds beautiful? Um, and it had nothing to do with me. And then I was like, it doesn't seem like people know about this, And then it worked too. I would, play at an open mic or whatever, and people's ears would perk up a little bit. But then all of a sudden, after 2 years messing around with that, it kind of started all over again, so it's constantly searching for something.
Interesting. My personal inspiration, I was raised on classical and folk by my parents, but my personal inspiration was Elton John.
Oh, wow.
I was in middle school when Elton John came into his prime. Yeah, I'm a little bit older than you. Came into his prime, and as a piano player, which was what I was,
okay.
Elton John was the perfect thing for me. Plus, all of his early music tended to follow a 4/1 chord progression. So once you knew how to play that on the piano, finger it right, it was kind of like you could just jump from one Elton John song to another.
Amazing, right?
That was fun. So I wasn't a guitar player, and I wasn't the guy who could carry around the chick magnet, device. But I could sit down in high school, I could sit down at any piano and, get everybody to sing along with Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting, or, Crocodile Rock, and that worked for me, as well as all of the other great piano music. And also it was about, learning to play by ear. And it sounds like we all do that at a certain point. You're picking stuff up by ear, whether you want to or not. And then you fall in love with something and you want to. And that's a whole other experience. My younger brother, he fell in love with the Beatles. So he taught himself guitar to be able to play Beatles songs, and got me sucked in through that. I was less of a Beatles fan than I was the Jackson 5. But the bottom line was, it all started with what you could play, what you were able to actually do and sound good at. So when you had that feeling of, oh my God, this sounds so beautiful on the guitar, I totally can identify with that. I was like, hey, this actually sounds like music.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing. I agree. Have you heard the most recent Beatles song?
It's funny. I looked at all the previews. I watched the documentary, but I haven't sat down and listened to the song yet. I've heard the little bits, and I've been reading what other people have to say about it. I'm like, okay, don't listen to what other people say. You got to do it for yourself and make your own judgment. So I'm not saying anything about it until I hear it.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah, I did read some stuff after the fact. I kind of went in there not knowing that. I don't know how much you read, but that it was edited a little bit.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I never heard the initial Lennon demo.
Yeah, right. And neither did I. I've only heard the little there was a tiny tidbit in one of the documentaries. So it'll be interesting discovery. Yeah. So along the way, you started playing guitar. You got more serious about it. And when did you decide you wanted to write original music, or do you do less of that?
No. So original music is basically what I started doing. So I picked up the guitar, and within about a month or so, 2 months, I moved down to Puerto Rico to study my master's degree. And, I just started writing original songs. And they were I didn't even know what they were. It wasn't a song. It was just me picking up my guitar and then just writing something down that basically was not a song. I think my first song was about an ant just walking down the road. And then it didn't even have a chorus or a verse. So it was just, but that was pretty much off the bat. I just started to try to write stuff.
And so what inspires you now in terms of writing stuff?
Right now, I guess for a while now, I've been writing a lot of storytelling songs. So that's what I've been really focusing on for the last 4 or 5 years or so. Trying to fit a whole story into a song, and it makes it, hopefully, it comes across. So that's kind of what I've been focusing on a lot of late. But now, lately, I kind of want to get back into just writing just simple songs, that focus more on melody as opposed to getting caught up in the lyrical side of things.
Yeah, there's always that tension between lyric and melody. Not that it has to be a disaster, but that it seems that there's always this tension. And I find guitarists tend to write songs one way, and keyboard players write songs another way, and drummers write it another way, and then
Right.
bona fide composers write it another way. But do you tend to start with lyrics first and then a melody and then chords, or do you start with chords first and then lyrics and then a melody, or
Yeah,
what's your process?
it changes, I would say. A lot of the times, like it's just a riff on the guitar, and then let's see if I can kind of connect that. But it's usually multiple riffs on a guitar, or strumming the guitar and just kind of saying nonsense stuff, and then ultimately going back into my notes section and just putting a puzzle together, and then having some kind of thought, and then if it's a storyline, even sometimes merging other former ideas together, and then seeing, how can that help tell this story. And not really knowing where it's going. I found sometimes for me, it's like, that's why I kind of like just jamming parts together and saying, I wonder if this can kind of take the story in sort of an interesting way, an interesting direction.
That's different from Paul McCartney combining three songs into one.
Yeah.
You're saying that you take these different musical components and you keep them on the same theme. But you develop and extend the actual song, sticking with the original idea, not just cobbling different ideas together.
Correct. Yeah. So it's
Well, if I may ask one more question,
sure.
what's it? Could you share with us the example of a song where a particularly challenging song where you pull these different components together?
Yeah. So I had written a song about a guy who was cheated on. Not me. It was a completely fictional song. Guy who was cheated on, and I had this other I guess idea of a dung beetle who was life gave the dung beetle some things that weren't so wonderful in life, but learned how to roll with it, I guess you can say. So I was able to, just trying to piece that kind of those two separate ideas together, and then just trying to, how can I connect this idea of something that exists in nature to a person who overcomes some sort of struggle. And those two thoughts I had like 10 years apart. And then one day I was like, let me just put them together, and it kind of formed a bit of a story, I guess.
That sounds cool. Are we going to hear that song at People's Voice?
We will, yeah.
Oh,
we
cool.
Will. Yeah.
That sounds good. I mean, what I noticed was that you're one of the few artists that I've seen that presents a theme for your production, so to speak, for your performance. And tell us more about that and how that came about.
Yeah. So let's see. I guess that started for me originally where I have a library program called New York Photo Songs, where I've taken just giant photographs, famous, iconic, and obscure New York State photographs, and I printed them out very large. So I perform basically the songs behind the stories behind the picture. So and during that time, I noticed people kind of enjoyed looking at art and then kind of hearing the song. So with these story songs that I'd put together in 2019, I contacted an artist in Indonesia, and he has basically drawn up, about 15 songs or so, and there's a total of 300 pictures. So basically, for me, each story song, I'm sitting beside a giant screen, and I am sliding the art. It kind of goes by as I'm performing the story song.
Wow. Well, that sounds cool. Now, you are bringing your own projector, right? To people.
I'm bringing my own projector, and I travel with a screen as well.
Wow, that's great, because although we have a big white wall, so that you may not need the screen, but we've had some issues with people saying at the last minute, I need a projector. It's like, that's not part of our sound system.
No, I travel with two projectors just because.
Right, you got to have backup.
Exactly. Because the whole show is it's crazy to rely on technology beyond, but I guess people do it with speakers as well.
We do it with all electronic instruments. I mean, your keyboard can die.
You're right. Yeah. So I've learned I have to travel with multiple of everything, just because you don't want to be in a situation where you're letting people down.
Sure, I hear you. Are
Um,
you based in New York City now?
I'm based in New Milford, Connecticut, which
Oh,
is
you're still in
about,
New Milford. Okay, gotcha,
I'm in
gotcha.
New Milford, yeah.
Right. Oh,
So yeah,
that's
that's
cool.
pretty much what I've been rolling with, I guess, since this past summer. I got it's just me playing story songs beside the artwork going by. Um, yeah,
And when you started performing, I mean, obviously you like stories. I mean, and who were some of your inspirations when it came to being storytelling songwriters?
so Dylan, I would say for sure. Initially, really, listening to some of his stuff, um, and then recently, probably within the last 7 or 8 years, it was John Prine.
Mhm.
Had a very strong. I read an interview that he put out, and I really connected with his idea um, of just kind of introducing little details that kind of perk people's ears up. So I would say Prine has been the biggest one for me.
I think that the John Prine song that most people who might have had any exposure to him have
Yep.
heard would be Angel from Montgomery.
Sure.
And when you talk about little details that perk you up,
Yep.
that's definitely a song that has that in it and makes you go, oh wow, what made him think of putting that in? But it adds such texture and richness to the
Yeah.
scene that you're painting with the music.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, he had a quote that said, "I'm curious, like what the colors of the curtains are in the room. When this sad thing is going on in the song." So I remember him, you know, taking the idea of like having something emotional happening in the song, and then you know, is there an ashtray going on? Or his example was the colors of the curtains and how that can just change your influence the way that people feel something. You know?
It reminds me, I forgive me for being too ignorant to remember the author, but I do remember reading either a poem or a book. I heard a fly buzz when I died when I was younger, and it's all focused on this person who's about to die and all the different components of what's going on in the room around them. And the exquisite details that you pay attention to in those moments that you don't pay attention to in the rest of your life. Uh,
Wow.
so it sounds like that kind of approach. It's like, yes, we
Yeah.
need to get into the entire milieu here, of where we are, and
Right.
and
Yeah. It's
feel it.
almost like I've heard someone else talk about it in terms of like a film where you start off on a very small object, wherever it might be. So if you're starting a song, it might be just starting with a crusty piece of pie hanging off the side of a table, and then kind
Mhm.
of zooming out, and then it's like, oh, who are the characters around that crusty piece of pie, and why is it there, or whatever it might be.
So your songs kind of take shape like that. They start off as little crusty pieces of pie.
That was what I would say was a poor example.
No, I think it's great. As long as it's pumpkin pie, it's fine with me.
Could be, yeah. How long's the whipped cream been on there? I don't know.
Right.
And then there's that fly, right?
Right, right.
So,
It's banana pudding, the fruit flies. But anyway, so so in terms of your performance history, where have you been performing? What kind of audiences do you usually get the opportunity to engage with? What's that been
so
like?
yeah, over the last year, I've been playing at a mix of like performing arts centers, some theaters, folk clubs, a couple festivals here or there, um, some listening rooms for the most part. I did try this at a bar; it just didn't go over as well because people all of a sudden it's kind of like a listening room kind of show. So that's kind of what I've been doing over the last year or so. And then before that, before this show, I was playing just probably a little bit less, but more festivals.
Gotcha. And in terms of the number of days a year that you're, touring or gigging or whatever, how do you divide up your time?
Um, yeah, I would say this past year I'm probably at about 25 or 30 shows or so, which is, with 3 kids, and I have a full-time job as well as a teacher.
Ah,
Um,
another
so-
teacher.
hey, are
Lots
you
of
a teacher?
Well, I'm not, but there's so many teachers who've turned
Right,
into songwriters, performers.
right.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. So, that was with doing all that, I have my summers off. So I was able to it's kind of, I mean, that's kind of how I was hoping to pay the bills this summer. And I was able to. So,
Good.
but yeah, so that was really, kind of works out well.
How
But
old are
yeah,
your kids?
they have two twin boys who are 10, and I have my daughter's 4.
And as a parent, I have to ask this question:
Sure.
Are they musical?
They play viola. Yeah.
All of them play viola.
The boys both play viola, and they picked it up because when my son John was about 6, he asked me to write a song about somebody with a big beard. And then that song ends up having like a little bit of a fiddle on it, so they ended up going with the viola. So their goal is at one point play on stage with me to this song called "Big Old Beard."
That's really cool. But viola, of all things, I mean, I have 2 brothers, and my 2 brothers, who both of them were younger, both started off with violin, and then my middle brother switched over to viola. I don't even remember why.
Right.
I think it was my mother's influence, because I played cello. My mother played piano. She wanted us to play, Mozart quartets with her, and so she was, orchestrating this little orchestra. But Jeffrey would have just kept going on with violin, if he hadn't been pushed over to viola. So, how did your sons end up going with viola?
Yeah, I just think I think that was the only stringed option, perhaps, at that point. I think the violin, just like and they were like, I think it was that simple.
We're out of violins. We need violas.
Exactly. They're like, what's this? And now I'm buying viola strings.
Wow. Well, I have to say, my motive for playing the cello, I mean, I realized as I got older that I happened to like lower tone instruments, period, but I didn't know that when I was in 3rd grade. My motive for playing the cello was you got to sit down and the violinist had to stand up in the school orchestra.
That's true, yeah. Probably, I imagine is it better on the neck, the cello versus the violin?
Walking around like this, I'm sure it is, but but I never even got to that point. I just knew didn't want that, and then of course once I started playing, I was like, oh, I love the tone, etc. But I had never thought about going to viola. That always seemed to be something that the kids who didn't get a violin got stuck on viola.
That's it, yeah.
So wow, so 2 10-year-olds and a 4-year-old.
Yes.
Yeah, you have your hands full. And what do you teach?
I teach English as a second language.
Interesting. In New Milford.
In New York State.
Oh, in New York State. Oh, okay. Okay, gotcha.
I commute over there. I was living down in Florida, and I taught English down in language arts down in Florida. Before I lived in Florida from 2006 to 2019.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, my oldest son has recently become a teacher, and so he's dealing with the experience now of New York City school. He taught in Japan for 3 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
After college. And I said, yeah, that's nice. Now come and teach some kids who won't get up and bow when you walk in the room.
Yeah, I had the same experience. I taught in Thailand.
Oh, okay.
I have a picture I'm like, wow, I couldn't believe it. Pretty wild.
And then you came back.
Came back, yeah.
So, all right. So, in terms of the topics of your songs, yes, you said you were a storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
We live in interesting times. Any particular stories or story themes jumping out at you over recent years or recent months?
Yeah, I would say a lot of my stories revolve around characters overcoming their surroundings. So I have a story that kind of deals with a Vietnam vet, kind of just dealing with his troubles many years later, and many of them are true. I have a true story written. I was at a Holocaust seminar in 2010, and a gentleman told a story about his experiences, and it brought me to tears at that spot in time. And I'll play that one for sure on the second. I don't want to get into too much detail now, but just the effect of a mother and going through those times. So a lot of my stories, I would say, do deal with the idea of But then I have another one that kind of talks about it's a couple. One's an evolutionary biologist, and the other one's a pastor. And they're in love, and it's like how do you deal with this question of it's called Jesus and the dinosaurs. So
I love it already.
So there's and many this one I would say is more not really a true story, but many of them are true stories.
Wait, I'm sure it's a true story somewhere.
It is, yeah. No, it's funny. It's funny that you say that because I was playing a show down in South Carolina and back in June, and yeah, a guy came up to me and he actually said, well, his wife was the science teacher at school, and he was the theological teacher. So it was very interesting. It's like you never know. So what's real and what's not. Sometimes what is not real is actually, like you said, it's real.
And you've played a lot of colleges or?
No, not really. I haven't really played too many colleges.
Is that by choice or it just hasn't come up or?
It hasn't come up, I would like to, I would be interested in it, but it's just a matter of, I guess, booking them.
Right. Yeah. Booking. Oh my God. Booking. So, and so from the standpoint of, where you see yourself going in the business, because, you are trying to make a living to some degree,
right?
As many of us would like to. In the next, 3 to 5 years, what do you see happening out there? I mean, if you were talking to a younger you
mm-hmm.
today, and they're saying, "Oh, I want to start playing music," out there. Yeah. What sort of thoughts would you share about how things are going for artists and musicians, songwriters in particular?
Wow. That's a good question. So my advice to myself would be to just try to figure something out that works, and don't do not, if you believe in something that you are bringing to the table, just keep on spending your time thinking about how you can just keep bringing it up a notch. And I'm not, and that's different for everything. I was asking myself that same question yesterday. How can I take this idea of, the songs, the stories, and art, and I don't know, how can you get it to more people? And that's always the question, how do you, and it's such a confusing question because the answer is always, you have to put it out on the computer and hopefully people see it. And that's just such a terrible way to have to, I don't like promoting myself. That's part of my problem. I'm not good at that. I'm not good at that. So I probably need myself 5 years from now talking to me now.
Good one. I like that. Well, what did you do during the pandemic? I mean,
how
did you handle that?
I was knocking this idea out. I was just like, how can I? Because this idea initially, I was like, how am I going to do this? Is this even going to be any good? And then I drew like a contraption of, I'm going to blow up all these pictures and I'm going to stack them side by side, and I'm going to create some lever system where I change these pictures one at a time. And then all of a sudden, and this was like 7 days of this. And then I said, they have computers, right? So I basically, it was just me communicating with this artist fella over in Indonesia, sending him pages of notes, and then he would translate them because he doesn't speak English. So that's how I basically spent the pandemic, just trying to knock this thing out.
Wow. Well, if I may just offer some unsolicited advice from an inexperienced gigger myself, and I am not particularly experienced in doing the gig part, you offer a package that is very interesting since you combine the art with the music and you're integrating the stories into all of the above. I'm sure there's some workshops in there somewhere that you can develop that would be appealing to some college audiences,
Yeah.
Or even high school, but high school ones don't have the budgets.
You're right. Yeah. I would love to be able to do that. It's just just reaching out, you would say, to just a university, like the people in charge of the booking?
It's always it's a long discussion. I definitely want you to talk to some friends of mine who do this.
Okay.
A number of folks who perform at People's Voice and are members of the People's Music Network for Songs of Freedom and Struggle do this.
Okay.
It usually, centers around the student activities fee.
Gotcha.
Whoever controls the student activities budget is the person you want to talk to.
All right.
And unfortunately, in these times politically,
Right.
student activities have become extremely, loaded,
Mhm.
and it's interesting to see how stuff is going to evolve over the next couple of years when it comes to cultural expression.
Mhm.
But certainly the budgets are there.
Budgets are there.
You just got to figure out a way to get into them. so,
Yeah.
so now looking at the world today as a guitarist, as a songwriter, as a parent,
Mhm.
as a performer, are there any particular artists out there now that you find yourself drawn to, whose music is speaking to you in a different way than might have been 10 years ago or 15 years ago? Are there any particular styles that approaches to songs that you want to try differently? I mean, some folks to say, I work in the folk genre. That's what I do, right? And
Right.
others say I'm R&B. That's what I do. Others say I'm world music. That's what I do. Others are jazz. That's what I do. But then there are folks, the David Byrnes of the world, et cetera, who say, okay, I'm going to throw a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and integrate all kinds of things. How do you see, as you move forward as a songwriter, how do you see yourself developing?
It's a good question. I've been listening to a lot of instrumental music, a lot of instrumental piano, and even just some Herbie Hancock.
Mm.
Even that, there's a guy named George Winston who passed away a couple years ago,
yes.
and I came across one of his earliest albums, 1972, and there was the second or third song. I think it was literally just called Song something. It was song. It was like his first album. I think it's a third song on that album, and there's just something about the emotional feeling behind it. And I guess I would like to try to get into a little bit more of an instrumental approach to just bringing that in, because I feel like that's something that it moves me, and it's the challenge of just creating that originally, though, which is.
So, wait, are you saying the arrangement of, let's say you have song X, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are you saying the way you would approach arranging song X would take into account more of the instrumentation, or are you saying you want to actually create pieces that are designed primarily for instruments to perform, or both?
Probably both. I guess I would like to create more within my own arrangements. It would be wonderful to be able to have some more musicality, and also, I've had about 8 or 9 instrumentals that I've written as well, where it would be nice to kind of bring those out into the world. Instrumental guitar stuff, like kind of like John Fahey, the Leo Kottke, that kind of stuff. But I've never really brought that out, so that would kind of be a cool thing. But it's just about getting a good recording, and
Sure. The next phase of John Brown could be very instrumental. I mean, a lot of people have done that sort of thing, and now it's easier than ever, given the way technology is, and not necessarily cheaper, but easier to do. So, well, good luck.
Thank you. I feel like sometimes I almost feel like I'm afraid to put stuff out there. I don't know why. There's a fear of kind of like, and I heard someone say you shouldn't be so precious about what you're putting out there, just because, hey, just throw it out there and see what happens.
I feel you. When people have said that to me too, it's like, look, it's more important to get stuff out than to make it perfect. And I'm like, maybe it'll never be perfect, but if I'm not happy with it, and it goes out, then every time I hear it, I'm wincing inside, and I'm saying, if only I had waited a little longer, And granted, that can paralyze you.
Yeah.
I mean, you can definitely stop yourself in ways you shouldn't. But at the
Right.
same time, I think insisting on a certain amount of quality control, so
Hmm.
to speak, of your own work, I think that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, you're right.
How many albums do you have out, or do you have any albums out?
I have 2 albums out. I'm ready to record another one if I could just get a little budget together. And then I have an album that I recorded back in 2010 or so that I just never ended up putting out. So I have technically I've
Any
recorded.
particular reason why you didn't put it out?
Um, I think I just wasn't necessarily happy with the songwriting. And after the recording was good, I just probably a year after I wrote that album, I kind of liked some of the other songs I was coming up with, and I just never put that first one out based on. I think it was just inexperienced songwriting, at least from my eyes.
Interesting, very interesting. Do you record it at home? Do you have a home studio, or do you use a local studio?
Yeah, I have a bad history of trying to record at home, and it usually leaves me like passing out inside my closet from like lightning bolts going through my ears, and then I wander up to the bathroom mirror and just kind of look at myself with my headphones on, and then that's usually the process for me. Uh,
That is
so
wild.
yeah, so I wish I could. I just don't know what I'm doing. So I've recorded. Yeah, I've always stepped up to some studios and done it that way.
So there's some local places in New Milford that you use?
Yeah, I recorded with a guy named Andy Stack in Beacon, New York.
Oh,
Are you familiar with the artist Yola at all?
I've heard the name, yes.
He plays lead guitar for her. She's really, really fantastic. And I recorded with a guy down in Florida named Justin Beckler, who's very, very talented.
Cool. Very cool. Do you do any long distance, like, I record my tracks up here, send them down there, etc., or do you just travel and do it in person?
Yeah, in person. I wish I could. Even I'm still trying to get on Zoom.
Well, you're here today, so I congratulate you for getting
Thank
too
you.
far.
I made it.
I mean, I was listening to my girlfriend and I went to see the Taylor Swift Eras tour, uh,
Hmm.
and I'm not, I can't consider myself a Swiftie, so to speak, but
All right.
I wanted to immerse myself in a lot of her music because I only know a couple of her songs. I was
Right.
trying to figure out, what's so addictive about this. And I will say, not to change the subject to her, but I will say I am totally impressed by
Okay.
her, by what she's done. I think I want to read a book of her lyrics. I like her music less than I like her lyrics, but one of the things she talks about in the movie is how she recorded albums during the pandemic and how
Okay.
people were sending files all over the place. And I know lots of people have done that.
Right.
But the idea of being able to create, high quality from an audio standpoint music, throwing files around through the internet to each other and, recording stuff that way, that it still blows my mind, and I was involved with it too, during the pandemic, throwing
Right.
files around. But it's mind blowing, but at the same time, and it scares you because it's so
Uh-huh.
much easier to work with people in person. You can communicate, you can get nuance, you get it, but at the same time, if we invest that quality control that we talked
Mhm.
about earlier, you can do incredible work with people all over the world.
Now, would you say that it's easier to get a quality recording now than it was 7 or 8 years ago? I feel like I hear a lot of folks talking about, how they're just getting quality stuff. And would you say that's changed?
Well, I think that depends on the genre you're in. I think that
Right.
depends on how you write. I think it depends on whether you're primarily acoustic, versus electronic.
Hmm.
And I also think people have certain preferences around analog versus digital type
Hmm.
sound. Um, and so you can get really high quality recordings now because everything is digital.
Right.
Is it exactly the sound you want it to be when you heard it? See, my thing is, I want to take my music and I want to record it the way I hear it in my head. I
Right.
don't want to keep settling for a version that's the version that was played by the people who can play it a certain way. I want it to sound the way I hear it in my head.
Right.
What the technology allows us to do, who are like that, it allows us to get closer to that because we can do the electronics.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean, and we can't afford to sit in front of a 100-piece orchestra, right? And when someone like you, who's beginning to think about how can I bring out that three-dimensionality in my songs, how can I improve the texture, whatever it is that you're trying to do, it tends to lead itself to add more and more instruments or different ways in which to use instruments. Well, we can't afford, we can't afford to go out and hire an orchestra usually, right? So the electronics is there, makes it possible for us to as creators to get closer. But does that mean that we're really getting a higher quality sound?
Right.
That's a judgment call.
Yeah.
It really depends on how our ears have been trained, what we listen to. And, I think that's a hard question to answer for me, at least.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm curious if things have gotten better in the last year or two or three or four.
I think the ability to communicate with other people, to coordinate performances and recordings has definitely improved.
That's improved. Okay.
That's absolutely improved. Whether or not the end result from a sound standpoint is better, really, I think it really depends on the genre. I would find it hard pressed to believe that a jazz performance, for example, or a bluegrass performance, or any of the things that really rely on the live interaction between people could be could be equaled by somebody playing this part, digitally over here, someone else playing separately, not at the same time.
Right.
You lose that particular energy. Now, it may still sound good, technically, but is it what it might have been? And I think that's what all of us have to ask ourselves about the pandemic across the board. What we went through in the pandemic, did we live the lives we might have lived if there wasn't a pandemic? Well, the answer is obviously no, we did not. Certainly for kids, right? Kids in school didn't, right? I feel terrible for all the kids who had their last year of high school be, the first year of the pandemic, and their first year of college was the second year of the pandemic. That sucked. And we realized that social component is so important. Well, that applies to music too. I mean, as much as we may live in our own heads, as I can do, music is designed to be a form of communication. It's designed to be a form of interaction. It's the voice. It's the inner voice speaking to somebody, not just to yourself.
Right. So, it's true. You think about if there was just one person in the world, and would music be as influential to that person if it was just one? Probably not. I don't know.
If that one couldn't spend the time focusing on what every bird sings and the sound that every animal makes, you would basically be humming the same things over and over again, because we all sort of get trapped into our own loops, right? Yeah. As songwriters, we find ourselves using certain rhythms and phrases and chords over and over again, and then we kind of have to break that and say, no more, don't do that again. I've done that before, too many times. So we need that sort of replenishment of ideas and energy and love. I mean, music is love. But then again, let me stop rambling here. So what else would you like to share with us about you, your music, your performance that's upcoming at People's Voice Cafe? What would you like to share with us that we haven't already discussed?
I would just like to say, for anybody who does come out to the show, thank you so much, just because I know it's December 2nd in New York City. You could be doing anything else in the world. So I just want to say thank you first and foremost for, coming out. I will say, if you do come out, you'll see something, hopefully, that is maybe different than you've seen before. That's my whole hope. Whether or not you like it or not, that's up to you. But hopefully you'll leave and say, oh, that was something interesting and unique at the bare minimum. And other than that, just, I'm looking forward to meeting everybody. And I just thank you again for the opportunity.
Oh, well, you're more than welcome. I love the process of discovering folks who I was not familiar with before, and getting to talk with you has been a pleasure. And I'm looking forward to hearing the music and seeing the art and seeing it all come together. I do think one of the blessings of technology when it comes to the People's Voice Cafe is the fact that we can live stream these performances. So if, God forbid, there's bad weather, or a large chunk of our audience tends to be a little bit older in age, if they don't feel like they can come out that night, they can still watch the performance, and that's a wonderful thing.
That is. I agree.
It may not be the same as being there, but in many
Right.
ways, certainly the way we do it,
Sure.
it's very being there.
Absolutely.
So, all right. Well, listen, John, this has really been a pleasure. Thank you for sharing. And I think that working together, we'll have a good turnout for your show. I'm looking forward to that.
Sounds great. Can't wait.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And enjoy the weekend.
I shall, too.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye.